few weeks ago, I probably had the situation I was in, had the most anxiety that I've ever experienced. And you could either go forward or you can go backwards, and I had to do what was needed, and that was get closer, get closer to God, get in His presence, turn worship music on, early in the morning, and just pray and get a hold of that peace, because my mind was all over the place, talking about anxiety, like almost through the whole day, through the whole night, and long story short, that part was over. It was a lesson learned. Thank God, that I pushed through. Thank God that I pressed towards, Him, and because He revealed Himself the next few days through a dream and through a conversation. Matter of fact, on the same day, the night before, we went to the Niner and Bronco game with the barbershop, and so I had a random dream that somebody was trying to sell me this outdated camper type of truck, and it looked like an old U-Haul, like the little basic ones. Just looked old, but it had everything you needed in it to survive. It had a bed inside, it had a kitchen, it had a porta potty that connected to the outside, it had everything. It was neat. Of course, if I would have bought it, I would have fixed it up, painted it, but they wanted $17,000 for it. This dream just came out of nowhere. I didn't watch no movies, nothing that had to do with it. And then, so that's the dream. And then I had this conversation. This is in real life. I had this conversation with one of the coaches I coach with. We were talking about another coach that used to coach with us a couple years back, and he had passed away. And he was telling me, yeah, did you hear that? He passed away, 4 or 5 months ago. And I was like, oh man, I didn't even know that. So when he told me that, there's this other coach that popped in my head that used to coach with us. And he popped in my spirit, because I heard that he wasn't doing good as well. And I'm just going to say Coach B, for the sake of privacy. But yes, so he had popped in my head, as we were talking about the coach that passed away. And I asked the coach that I was talking to, hey, how's Coach B doing? I heard he wasn't doing good last time that I, checked. And he said, yeah, I don't know, he might be on his deathbed too. I'm not sure how he's doing. So I felt God immediately, put in my spirit. I felt God say, pray for him, maybe even reach out to him, and so that night, I went to bed and I prayed for him, before I went to bed, and then I think I had a dream, that night as well. So the conversation about the coach and the dream, later on that night about the truck. And then, so now fast forward to the next day, we're going at the barbershop in the bus, to the Niner game, and Niners versus Broncos, and we break down about 4 miles to the stadium, from the stadium, and we're all getting out, stretching and stuff, and then we look, I see this truck across the street, and it reminded me of the one in my dream. It was just like it, but it was a newer version, it was I ain't never seen a truck like this fancy with like the camper in the back that just had so much gadgets and all this stuff, and we figured, if anybody's gonna help us, it's gonna be that truck. And I know that Jay had waved down, the truck, and out of all the cars that could come help us, here comes the truck, like the one in my dream, and it comes, and then and I was telling one of the barbers, like, man, that truck over there is like the one I had in my dream, and I didn't even know that it was coming to help us. So it was just crazy how it was reiterated, the very next day, that this truck, like the one in my dream, was coming to help us now, and so it ended up being some lady. She had a rope and stuff. She was already fancy old rope. She was getting ready to help pull us, off to the side and stuff. And we ended up not needing her help because one of the guys that was with us, he figured out what was wrong. Simple fix. So, anyways, so now we're getting to the fast forward. We're getting to the game now. I'm posting on my story. We're at the game. This and that. One of my friends, he happens to be there, and he sees me, on my story, and then he says, hey, I think we're by each other, so he showed me where he was sitting at. I walked around looking for him, and then I called him when I was at his seat, and he was at the snack bar. I couldn't hear him, so I said, hey, well, I'm going to go back to my seat. If I see you, I see you, so as I'm walking back, I'm walking fast, I'm walking in and out of people, going back to my seat, trying to find where my seat's at, and who do I run into? Boom. I run into Coach B, the one that I was just talking about the night before, the same night that I had the dream about the truck, which I seen the next day. I have a conversation about Coach B, the one that wasn't doing good, the one that God said you need to pray for him. I run into him. Out of all people, out of the thousands of people, out of every level that could have been at the stadium, here we are, boom, and we meet. And I just said, man, I just smiled. And I said, man, God makes no mistakes. I said, I was just praying for you last night. I told him about the coach that passed away, and that how immediately he popped in my spirit. And God said, pray for him, and I just put my hand on his stomach. I said, you know what, your body's your temple. Take care of it, and I said, how are you doing, and he goes, I'm doing better, and I said, that's good, man. I'm glad to hear that. And I just said, man, it's no coincidence that you're right here in front of me, I'm praying for you, and that was that. But it was cool that I was able to get through what I was going through, that little season of anxiety. But as I was going through it, instead of going backwards, I went forward and pressed towards God in His presence, and just was reminded, that all this stuff is already paid for, at the cross anyway. And so what, if I'm not perfect, the perfect one lives in me, so I'm entitled to that peace. And thank God that that's done, lesson learned. But the very next day, for God to give me those divine appointments through a dream and through a conversation, was just like, I was in awe. And that's why I was like, man, I have to share it before I sit on it too long. And I just normalize, the fact that this is something big. These are divine appointments, and man, if they never happen to you, you just gotta start praying more, and getting a hold of God. But it's crazy because here we are, thousands of miles away. We run into each other, and just God makes no mistakes. So wanted to share that, just get that off my chest and be obedient for whatever it's worth. Good night.